The title of this lecture is The Crisis of the Later Middle Ages, 1300 to 1450, the Babylonian Captivity of the Church and the Great Schism of 1378. This is yet another example of state versus church in the medieval period. From 1285 to 1314, the King of France was Philip IV, known as the Fair because of his great beauty. He ended up in an argument with Pope Boniface VIII, who was the Pope of the Roman Catholic Church from 1294 to 1303. These two claimed to be arguing over the issue of taxes and clerics, but the real issue, of course, is authority and power. Who is more powerful, any king of Europe, in this case Philip IV, the Fair of France, or any given Pope of the Roman Catholic Church? Well, Philip IV and Pope Boniface VIII argued over a couple of surface issues, taxes and clerics. In other words, Philip IV felt that as the King of France, he should be able to tax his French citizens whenever he chose to do so, whenever he needed the money for some project or the other, or some money to keep the government afloat and running. Pope Boniface VIII, however, intervened in French politics and told Philip IV, the King of France, that he, Philip, had to gain permission from the Pope in order to tax the French people. As the Pope pointed out, the people of France were Christian first and therefore subject to the Pope's authority first, French second, subject second to the French king's wishes and demands. Philip, of course, thought this was completely and totally insane, that he could not tax his people without the Pope's permission. They also argued over the issue of clerics, and this will sound somewhat familiar. We talked about this in a previous lecture as a problem between King Henry II of England and his former friend turned rival Thomas Becket. Here's another example of arguing over clerics. Philip IV felt that clerics, that is to say, any member of the church who was accused of a crime, should be tried in royal court. Pope Boniface, of course, and the clerics themselves preferred to be tried in a church court where the punishment was much more lenient. So Philip and Boniface argue over these two issues. It prompts Pope Boniface to complete a pamphlet called Unum Sanctum, which is Latin for one law, one power, or one authority. Of course, it's very easy to figure out that Pope Boniface felt that the one power, the one authority, the one law for Europe should come from the Pope. Boniface and Philip ended up in a very heated argument, almost like what we saw with the Gregorian Revolution in a previous lecture. Pope Boniface and Philip argued to the point that Philip attempted to accuse and arrest the Pope on heresy charges. Of course, it would be impossible for a Pope to be arrested on charges of heresy because it is the Pope who determines what heresy is. So the stress on Pope Boniface caused him to die. He was an elderly man in failing health anyway. Philip was excited, and that's a horrible thing to say, but he was excited over the death of his enemy Boniface and thought that he could use his power and influence to possibly persuade the Roman Catholic cardinals, the individuals who were responsible for electing the Pope, to select someone of Philip's choosing. This is lay investiture to the extreme. So the man suggested by Philip for the office of Pope was Clement V. Why? Because Clement V was a Frenchman, and also because he was terminally ill and dying with cancer. Tradition had been that for the 1,000 years that the Christian church had been in existence to this point, the tradition had been that the Roman Catholic Pope was in fact Italian and oversaw the church from its traditional capital in the city of Rome. Philip shakes things up here by having a Frenchman, Clement V, named Pope, and also by having Clement V oversee the church not from its traditional capital at Rome, but from a French city called Avignon. Clement V reigned from 1305 to 1314 as the Pope of the Roman Catholic Church. Philip had strongly encouraged, the cardinals of the Roman Catholic Church to select this Frenchman who was terminally ill with cancer so that he, Philip, could control the new pope. This begins a period in church history known as the Babylonian captivity of the church. This, of course, refers to the ancient captivity of the Jews, as we saw in chapter 2, by the conquering Assyrians. So when we say Babylonian captivity of the church here, what do we mean? Well, from 1305 until 1378, there is a break with Roman Catholic tradition. All of the popes from 1305 until 1378 will be French, not Italian, and they will oversee the church not from Rome, but from Avignon. Throughout Europe, most individuals saw the Roman Catholic popes, beginning with Clement V in 1305, as the puppets of the French king, that the church had become the captive of the French government. We skip ahead a bit here, and let's just go ahead and note that from Clement V's death in 1314 until 1378, all of the popes of the Roman Catholic Church are French, overseeing the church from Avignon. In 1378, Pope Gregory XI, a Frenchman who had overseen the church from Avignon during his reign as pope from 1370 until his death in 1378, died. So when he died in 1378, of course, you have to have a new pope. Gregory had tried to bring back the papacy to Rome, but died before he carried out that wish. When he died in 1378, of course, the College of Cardinals gets together to select a new pope, and most assume that based on current trend, the next pope would be French and would oversee the church from Avignon. The College of Cardinals got together in the city of Rome to select a new pope. While they were meeting in what is called a secret enclave or a secret meeting, their meeting was interrupted by an Italian mob of angry Roman Catholics who wanted to see the church return to tradition of an Italian pope overseeing the church from Rome. So, under threat of violence and possibly death even, the College of Cardinals quickly picked the first Italian possibility out of the stack of applicants for the job of pope. The man they selected under stress and duress was Urban VI, who became the pope in 1378. Urban VI was Italian and planned to oversee the church from the traditional capital of Rome. But very quickly the College of Cardinals realized that Urban VI was a bad selection. All they were thinking of in 1378 was escaping the threat of this Italian mob, so they had selected the first Italian applicant that they had come across in the stacks. So Urban VI turned out to be somewhat mentally unstable, a man who was prone to hysteria, to violent outbursts, just generally not a nice person. He quickly attacked a long-standing practice among the cardinals called pluralism. This was the opportunity offered to cardinals to hold many jobs within the Roman Catholic Church. The problem with pluralism is that it meant that these cardinals who had taken a vow of poverty were gaining multiple church salaries and were gaining a great deal of wealth, power, and influence by having multiple jobs in the church. But it also led to corruption and absenteeism. Cardinals, of course, could not be at all of their jobs or in many places at one time. So some of the work that they were supposed to be doing was left undone. So Urban VI attacks pluralism, outlaws it, says no more. The College of Cardinals sees this as Urban sort of biting the hand that feeds, so to speak. In other words, they had just given Urban VI the title of Pope, and they thought, this is the way he repays us, by attacking pluralism, by telling us we can't have multiple jobs, multiple salaries, power and influence. Well, we don't like that. So, sneaking out of Rome in ones, twos, threes, in small groups so as not to arouse suspicion, the College of Cardinals eventually met up at Avignon. There, they issued a statement. We chose Urban VI under duress. He was not the best applicant. We rescind our decision to give the papacy to Urban VI and now select Clement VII as the new Pope of the Roman Catholic Church. Clement VII was formerly known before 1378 as the Cardinal Robert of Geneva, who was cousin to the current French King Charles V. So it's obvious why the College of Cardinals chose Clement V. He was very well connected, a cousin to the French king, and he was a Frenchman. So instead of Urban VI stepping down in favor of Clement VII, he remains on the throne of Rome as the Roman Catholic Pope. So in 1378, we have what is called the Great Schism of 1378, or the Great Split. Rather than having, as tradition provided, one Italian Pope overseeing the Church from Rome, we have an Italian Pope, Urban VI, who is attempting to run the Church from Rome, and a French Pope, Clement VII, who is attempting to run the Church from Avignon. Of course, this causes a great deal of confusion among the Christian community. Which is the rightful Pope? The first one or the second one chosen by the College of Cardinals? The Italian one? After all, we've had Italian popes for more than 1,000 years. Or the Frenchman? Since we've had this recent trend of French popes, maybe we should have a French pope. So all across Europe, Roman Catholics or Christians were confused. Which pope is the rightful leader of the Roman Catholic community? And it broke down along political lines, actually. The Italians, of course, supported Urban VI. The French supported Clement VII. The English, as we'll see in a successive lecture here, are at war with the French in what is called the 100 Years' War at this time. So they side with the Italian Pope. So which pope to follow, which one to choose, was determined based on political alliances. The Italian and French popes made this situation even worse because they publicly criticized each other, even going so far as to call each other the Antichrist. Many Christians were disgusted by the actions of both of these popes. Neither was acting as a perfect, shining example of Christian morality. Each man seemed more obsessed with power and maintaining the position of pope than doing what was right for the Roman Catholic Church. Well, this situation continued until 1409. Political and spiritual leaders from around Europe gathered together at an Italian city called Pisa, and there in 1409 they attempted to end the Great Schism of 1378 by appointing yet another new pope. Instead of the Italian and French popes stepping down, as the Council of Pisa had hoped, both the Italian and French popes remained, proclaiming themselves as the rightful popes, and now so did the third pope. So in 1409, we have 3 popes. There's only supposed to be 1. We've had 2 since 1378. Now in 1409, there are 3. Well, by 1414, it was clear. The schism had to be brought to an end for the good of the church community. Church membership had dropped off. Church attendance had dropped off. This was having a very profound and terrible impact on the church's reputation and prestige. So from 1414 to 1418, a meeting is held called the Council of Constance to deal with the Great Schism. it was finally determined that the three popes should step down for the good of the community, that is to say, the Christian community, and a new pope be selected from a pool of applicants. This pope was Martin V, who reigned as the pope from 1417 to 1431. He was Italian, and he returned the church to its capital at Rome. By 1414, the three popes, who were rivals of each other, had realized the folly of their way. When confronted with the evidence of declining church membership, declining church attendance, the three popes realized they had to step down and do the right thing. The results of the Great Schism were, one, that religious faith of many Christians in Europe was weakened. And what we mean by that is many Christians in Europe, of course, looked to the Pope to be a shining example of Christian virtue and morality. And what they saw in this period is that their popes seemed more obsessed with holding on to the power of the title Pope rather than acting as examples of Christian morality. Two, the prestige or reputation of the church was damaged. And three, church leaders also suffered a decline in prestige and reputation. Many Christians began to question the motives of the leaders of the church, and was there possibly some better way that the church could be governed? The last result that I briefly want to mention is that during the period of the Great Schism of 1378, many men were allowed to join the church who would not have been allowed to join before. Because these popes were so obsessed with holding on to the title of pope, they didn't always do the right thing. In other words, they weren't performing all of their job responsibilities. So they allowed many illiterate men to join the church as monks. At first, this may not seem like a big deal, but what we have to remember is that monks are required by society, by their role in society, to conduct church services and to educate noble boys and sometimes girls, and to write books. So if a monk is illiterate, he cannot perform any of his job functions. So in essence, the Great Schism led to an overall decline in prestige because many Christians saw their church leaders corrupted by power, and they saw many monks who were illiterate and incapable of doing their jobs.